I want to thank you, everyone, for coming. This is a celebration of a well-lived life. I've worked on trying to keep a straight face on this, and it's not going to be easy. My name is Roger Cargill. I've known Paul for about 40 years. We are here to celebrate and remember and honor a man who lived a very, very full life. The space he leaves behind us is enormous. Yet I stand here with my heart full of love for Paul. Just knowing him and loving him is a special person. I'm sure you can all, looking at the number of people here, I'm sure you can all agree. This man was committed to community service and public service, helping others, and just being amazing. How many of you have put a call into, thank you. How many of you have put a call into Paul? Electrical problem, whatever problem, emotional problem, and Paul was there the next day, if not the same day. Raise your hand. I will. He was there for everybody. In fact, if your life was going along good, you wouldn't see him because he seeked out to help people. That's the kind of person he was. Paul was the mayor of Howell. Paul was the mayor of Howell, the conqueror of the Ku Klux Klan. I would even say, on a few occasions, like 4 times a year, he might have been the mayor of St. Martin, too. I'll divert a little story on him. You know, it annoyed the daylights out of him. I went to St. Martin with him probably 6 or 7 times. Every time we spent the first day and a half making sure everybody on the island knew we were there. That was Paul's way. He's a father figure, a mentor. He was always there with teachable moments. I don't know how many times he had his hand on the back of my neck, trying to control my little bit of a temper I have. A pack rat. A hoarder. Is there another description for him? I'm in the midst of his barn right now. I can tell you firsthand. I'm there. How many folks here are in the ham radio group? Oh, jeez. Huge part of his life. I think he has 4 setup stations. One in the barn, one in the basement, one on the first floor, and every one of the vehicles. He's a building and fire codes expert. That's why I met him. I was 24 years old, putting on the 14th annual Spartan Stampede Rodeo, and they shut us down for fire codes. If it wasn't for Dennis Welch, where are you, Dennis? Stand up. Dennis said, you got to go see this Paul Streng guy. So I did. He fixed it. Doesn't he fix everything? He was an advisor to Governor Milliken on fire codes. He was a fire chief, assistant fire chief in Howell. He was chair of the wildfire task force, and I could go on and on. He was even Mr. Legs. Anybody know that? Anybody know that? He was Mr. Legs. MSU President's Award for Public Service. You guys know him just as well as I do. What did I miss? What other awards, what other accolades did I miss? The MSU table? Can you think of any? Ham folks. So when I reached out to you and invited you to this event, I asked you to bring your best Paul story. So I'm pointing over here to Betsy against the wall. I expect each and every one of you to be at this microphone. Yes, Julie, you too. Because we know everybody has a Paul story. So Betsy's going to wrangle cats. If you have a story, she has a number for you, and I need you to be up and ready and in line at this microphone so that we don't have a delay. Okay? With that said, I also wish to thank, this didn't come off by one person. We've been working on this for months. Kim Hafley, my coordinator with the golf course and the venue. Bill Humphrey, Betsy, Brian, all of us made this work. With that said, go see Betsy, please. Thank you.
While we get the first one up here, I'll tell a quick story while we get the first number up here. I first met Roger and Paul on March 13th, 1986. And I was just finishing up my first trimester at grad school at MSU. I had a friend who was an undergrad and part of the rodeo club, and I was invited to a party at Paul Revere's Tavern, which used to reside on Grand River. And that night I made some lifelong friends. Roger, Paul, Bill, there's a long laundry list of very important people. But one of the things that I thought was so unique is here we are, a student club, and here are two, collegiate advisors there, having fun, keeping an eye on everybody. And I think that's what Paul did best, as Roger alluded to, is keeping an eye on everybody. And he just always seemed to appear when we needed him. And he always was there to provide a little comic relief also. And I think one of my favorite stories of all times is at my wedding in 1990, Roger's mother was there. And we had an open bar at this wedding, and it might have had a little fun. And anyway, Roger's mom might have had a little too much to drink. And once again, Paul came to the rescue, as did Mr. Humphrey, in getting Mrs. Cargill back to the car and making sure she got home very safely that day. And we have some great memories and stories, but I think that is one of my favorite, and just always a caretaker, whether it was a college party, whether it was a wedding, any of those moments, those lifetime moments, you just knew that you had a good shoulder to talk to and to cry on. Okay, who's number one?
Hi. This is sort of a funny story, but more just tells more of what Paul was really like. I was coming back to our shop. I was having trouble with the air brakes. One of the wheels was hanging up on it. And I got about where Pepsi is in our shop, so I went past the Pepsi plant there. And the brake had hung up enough to where it caught fire. And I knew the hose was outside, but I had to run inside to turn the water on. And I noticed this car pull in behind me, and I didn't think too much of it. And it was, by the time I got to the shop, it was really burning pretty good. I ran in the shop, didn't look back, ran in the shop, turned the water on, came out, and here was Paul with his dress clothes, white shirt, bent down underneath the truck trying to put the fire out. And I couldn't believe, I said, give me the hose. No, no, I'll get it. And he just stayed there until he got the fire put out. But that's just kind of the kind of thing he would do.
Appreciate it.
So I first met Paul in probably 1992. I was an undergraduate at Michigan State in electrical engineering on the hybrid electric vehicle project. And I met Paul because he was teaching in the ag building, the agricultural engineering program. We used the garage. John Garish and Jerry Park were the sponsors or the lead professors. I don't know if anybody here even remembers John or Jerry Park. And so I got to know Paul. Paul I worked with. We were going to get some radios for telemetry for the hybrid electric vehicle because at the end we basically had to race the car. So Paul, being Paul, used his contacts at Motorola, got us some radios at the last minute. We got the radios, and they're the wrong type of radio, not exactly what we needed. Paul told the guy what we needed. The guy didn't think we knew. Naturally, Paul berated him for it. And so we ended up not using them. And through that project, Paul advised us. We had a guy welding under the car that caught himself on fire one time or another. We had all kinds of things going on, but Paul was kind of like an unofficial background advisor for us all the time, would come in the garage. And I also knew Paul was a ham, so I'm part of the ham group that knows Paul. And I have a picture and the original magazine at my house of Paul at the Ford Dearborn Proving Grounds with the car in the front. In the foreground, myself and another student, and Paul just standing like this, watching over in a suit and tie. And those of you that know Paul, you can probably imagine him there. And he was there. He went with us to the events. He helped us figure out strategy. He was always there, but he was never like officially part of the project. He didn't get the credit, so to speak. I've got a lot of ham stories about Paul, so I've got one in particular that's clean that I can share. So I live in Ann Arbor, and anytime I needed anything, Paul wouldn't hesitate to come down and help me. I mean, I remember him helping me do some wiring at my house at one time. I needed help. Who was there? Paul was there. Paul knew my kids. He was great with my kids. Both my kids are adopted from Guatemala. He was always interested in what was going on, how they were doing, especially when we were going through the adoption process. But this was probably back, I don't know, maybe about the late 90s. Paul had this trailer called the Yellow Submarine, was the nickname. Does anybody remember Paul's yellow trailer? Jack, yeah, a couple people do. So you know that bend when you're coming down 23 and you're going on that left to 14, those of you going to Ann Arbor? Paul got a flat, didn't have a spare. So who's he calling on the radio? He's calling me because he's on his way to pick me up. We must have spent half a day screwing around because I had to go back up the North Territorial, come back around. There was hardly any room. All these cars are speeding by. Then we had to find a tire shop. So I'm going to tire shops, finding the right tire that fits on this very special rim. And he's like, just get a rim. You know, it was just this really excitement. Finally, we got going, I don't know how many hours later, and finally got down to Dayton Hamvention late in the day. So there's a lot of Dayton Hamvention story, but I don't know that it's appropriate that I share some of them here. But I just wanted to share a couple anecdotes of how I knew Paul. He was a great friend, and we'll miss him.
I remember when he told me when he met with the Pope, because the Pope was a member of the Volunteer Firefighters Association, and he was discussing it with me. And that's one of my great memories.
I'm Dick Reed. I met Paul as a ham back in the 80s sometime. So we knew each other over the years, but I went to medical school in St. Martin, and Paul was down there all the time, and we would hang out and so on. But one time he was flying down, and he had a lot of frequent flyer miles, and he had a free companion ticket. and he flew my daughter down, and just surprised the hell out of me and my wife especially. And it was very cool. I have a Dayton story. A couple of years ago, not last year, but the year before, Paul and I hooked up, and we usually hooked up. I'm from Indiana, and we met at Dayton a lot. And we went around the show and everything. We got a bite to eat, and I said, "You want to have a beer?" He says, "Yeah." So we got a beer, sat down at a picnic table, and then this guy came along from Terre Haute that I didn't know at the time. But anyway, the three of us just started talking. And we talked, and all of a sudden we looked around. There is nobody there. There is nobody. This is in Xenia, and it's a fairgrounds thing, and they have all these food trucks and everything. And the whole place was dead empty. We were the last ones to leave the whole area. It was funny. It was really funny.
My name is Tom Falstrom. I'm retired from Eastern Michigan University, and it was through the university connection that I knew Paul. And it's amazing just what a wonderful connection it was having met him. This is a story of a time in which Paul came and rescued me, of course related to a car. I had just had the oil changed in Ann Arbor, and I was on my way to Holland, Michigan, and I got to just by the rest area by Okemos, and all of a sudden the dashboard lit up. I mean, any light that could go on went on, and the car was, the engine was rumbling, and so fortunately I was right there, so I pulled in the rest area and got out of the car and looked down, and there was this dark fluid running out from underneath the car, oil of course. And I thought, well, I gotta find a tow truck around here. And just as I thought that, the phone rang, and it was Paul. Now, I'm not gonna say anything about that because, but he said, "Hey, how's it going? What you doing?" I said, "Well, I was just getting ready to call a tow truck because there appears to be a problem with the engine." And he said, "Where are you?" And so I told him. He said, well, hold on. Before you call the tow truck, let me come and look at it." So he drove from Howell up to Okemos and got down on his hands and knees and was looking under the car and everything. And he said, "Well, your plug is missing on your oil pan." And short story short, apparently the guy hadn't tightened the plug when he put it back in, and going over those bumps on the highway, it came loose and fell out, and needless to say, the engine was totally ruined. But he stayed with me. He said, "I know a guy in Okemos who has a service station and has a tow truck, so I'm going to get in with you, or you get in with me." We weren't going anywhere in my car. And so he took me to the station, set things up. The guy came out and actually towed my truck back, or my vehicle back to Ann Arbor, to the place that I'd had the oil change done. And I was in Paul's car because he wasn't going to let me just drive with the tow truck driver. And so he drove all the way back to Ann Arbor, made sure everything was taken care of, worked out, drove me from the station back home, which I live actually in Ypsilanti, and then said, "Anything else?" I said, "Well, I need a drink, and I'm sure you do too." And as you know, Paul would not turn down a drink. I mean, if you offered him one. So he came in, had a drink, and then he got back in the car and headed back to Howell. And Monday this was on a Friday, Monday afternoon, he called up to find out what was going on with the car. and to make sure that I insisted that the people responsible for not putting the plug in replace the engine. Of course, I'd already been there, and they did.
Hi, I'm Steve Opperly. I am the president of the EAA Experimental Aircraft Association here at Livingston County Airport. And I have an airplane in a hangar out there. And Paul had a hangar right across from me. Okay, you probably didn't know it, but Paul was a pilot, did you? Well, he really wasn't. But he had this hangar. And he had a lot of stuff in his hangar, of course. And one of the requirements for having a hangar is you're supposed to have an airplane in there. So we allowed one of our airplanes to be in his hangar, and then he qualified. And everybody was happy. Well, I would work on my airplane, and he'd be working on something with his truck or whatever he had in the hangar. And he would come over and see what I was doing, and he would give me a hand with whatever. And this went on for about 6 months. And one day, he was over there in his hangar, and he looked over at me, and he come walking over like he was mad. And I said, oh boy, what did I do? He says, damn it, I want to join the EAA club. Just like that. And I says, you're in. And he actually became our secretary, and little did I know he had all of the qualities to be a secretary. And I'd only known Paul for probably the past 2 or 3 years, but he helped me out a lot. And there was an eclipse last year, if you remember, and I wanted to fly down to Ohio to watch it, where it would be a total eclipse. And I asked Paul, hey, would you like to come along? And he says, oh, absolutely. So I said, okay. And he said, well, let me give you some money for gas. And I said, no, I don't do that. And I says, if you want to do something, I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you bring the lunch? You know, bring stuff for us to eat. He said, oh, okay, I'll do that. So then, the day of the eclipse, and we were loading up the airplane, and I was doing my pre-flight, and he comes walking over to the airplane dragging a cooler behind him. And I mean, not a little one either. And I said, where do you think you're going with that? He said, well, this is our lunch. It's going in the airplane. And I says, we're probably going to be over gross weight now. But we were able to accommodate it, and we flew down to Ohio. And that was probably the best day ever. He really enjoyed that, and so did I. And I made a little video of it on my phone, and I don't know if Roger has that. Yeah, and he was quite a comedian, let me tell you. But we had a good time and flew back, and I remember when we flew back, it was kind of windy, and the wind had really kicked up. We were coming into Livingston County Airport, and I said, now, Paul, I says, this might be a little bumpy as far as, you know, when we land. And he goes, oh, I trust you, Steve. And I says, okay. And so, we actually had a very good landing. And it was so windy, there were other guys that flew down from Livingston County Airport that it was so windy they decided to land over in Ann Arbor. But we made it back just safe and sound. And one of those other pilots, the next time we saw him, he says, you pansy, you couldn't land back here. Well, they were probably being as safe as they could about it. But it was just one of those things that I remember about Paul. We had a really great time that day. And he also helped wire our clubhouse that we have out at the airport. Of course, he was very good at that. And I helped him do that too. And I'll never forget a lot of the things that he had done for our club. So, yeah, a lot of good memories.
Hello. I'm Sarah Lee, and I know Paul through Howell. He was mayor at the time, and I was hired as the aquatics director back in '93 to start the pool. And he was an avid swimmer, as you probably already know. And he was excited to finally have a pool here in his hometown so that he wasn't always driving to MSU to swim in the wee hours. And he was part of the pool committee to help basically figure out what this pool was going to look like, who it was for, which was the community, as well as the students in Howell at the school. But he became friends with me and a mentor to me because I was the new kid on the block. I didn't know Howell. I didn't know anybody here. And of course, I was a swimmer, and so we became friends. And then a few years later, our daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. She's fine. She's healthy now. But he was right there at the hospital as soon as that happened. And then a few years after that, we had a Make-A-Wish trip. And of course, guess where one of the stops was? It was in St. Martin. And so he had arranged for the most amazing day of basically the whole trip. It was like her most memorable time. And he met us at the airport. We had about 8 hours off the ship. He met us at the airport. He took us around the whole island. We went on a catamaran ride. The kids went parasailing. We went back to his apartment. You know, he showed us where he lived when he was down there in the winter. We met some of his favorite people while we were down there. And it was just so memorable, and our kids still talk about that to this day. And then another time, just real quick, we had a tornado come through Williamston, which is where I live, in '08, right, dear? I think it was '08. And my husband was gone, and everybody was out of the house. My mom was in the emergency room here in Howell at the time. So I happened into town basically right after the tornado had come through. And so everything was down, and I was pretty much without power like the rest of the town. And I called him, and he came the next morning with his generator because I was there stranded, and he was there to the rescue. So fun times, hard times, I mean, all of it, he was always there, and he was one of the most selfless people I've ever known. And so thank you, Roger, for putting this on.
I'm Steve Crandall. I have so many stories about Paul, too many to ever explain to everybody here. He was my brother. I met him 58 years ago. He was my roommate at college, at Ferris State College. We became close, very close friends. He was my best man at my first marriage. I was his best man at his wedding to Cindy. We did a lot of travel together. He called me up one day and said, hey, let's go to St. Martin. And so I made the first trip with Paul to St. Martin, where he obviously fell in love with it. Over the years, he became part of my parents' family. When he was mayor, he selected, was born and raised in Coldwater, and he selected during the Michigan Week when he was mayor to be the exchange mayor for Coldwater, just so that he could come down, spend time with my parents. He brought some of the city council people, I believe, and they just showed up at my parents' house, and then went on to do all the civic duties that Coldwater put on for him. Some people have talked about all the things he has done for them just by a call. I happened to be living in California and had built my first house, and I had a problem with my garage door opener. I had installed it myself. It did not work. I called up Paul, and I said, Paul, can you help me out? He said, yes, I'll be on the next plane to California. And so he came out and took care of the problem with my garage door opener in about 5 minutes, which is typical for Paul. Some of the stories that I could tell you that were very funny were funny only to Paul and I, and like some other people have said, many of them really can't be told. Some of it had to do with exchanging between nonprofit organizations, meaning the state of Michigan and some nonprofit theater organizations, goods and services. And so I had grown up in a town that had a professional theater, an old opera house, and Paul obviously was very tied to the theater programs and technical, and we used to bring stuff from Ferris State College's Playhouse down to the theater because at the theater they really didn't have a lot of money to spend, so in the state of Michigan did. Over the years, like a lot of people have said, you could call on Paul and he'd be there. About 14 years ago, I was diagnosed with lung cancer and was fortunate to have my lung cancer surgery done at University of Michigan. Paul showed up the night before surgery and was with my parents and my wife all the way through it. That's just the way Paul was. I was very fortunate to be able to see him about 2 weeks before he passed, and I'm very fortunate about that. Thank you.
Mr. Mark?
Thank you. My name's Mark Terrigian, and I met Paul about 4 years ago. I'm going to read a statement from a friend that couldn't be here tonight, but I'm going to just say a couple words. Paul, everybody I can see, I only knew him for 4 years, but he was very kind, very resourceful, and a guy that always was there for everybody. Everybody I could see and hear the stories of him, that everybody has that common understanding of him. I always liked that. When first I met him, I had a ham camp, and we had all the campers, and he was right there next to me. So he was kind of like the first guy that I met in this whole group of, 30 people. And he was just the nicest guy, but I really liked him because I said, look, we had a lot in common. He was a ham guy, I was a ham guy. I went to Michigan State, he was Michigan State, right through, blue and blue, not blue and blue, green and white. But we really hit it off. But I think, this is my little story of him, I think he was a kid at heart. We did this thing last year with the Edmund Fitzgerald. We were going to go up to Whitefish Point in November. It was going to be freezing and cold, and Paul was going to do it with a camper. And we did do it. And we took some rooms, and we went up and rented cabins, and but Paul was going to go really in style. We were going to take the camper. He was working on the food. The one gentleman that talked about the food, he was planning cooking. He's like, Mark, I'm going to make chicken. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It was out of control. I'm like, this guy's a kid, really. And that's how I am, too, in a way. But we're really going to miss him. That's, I think, the common thing. Everybody really missed this man. Now, this is a comment I'm going to read from a friend of his, Steve Marquis. And he was a ham operator also, but at Michigan State. His call sign, W8TOW. Steve chose to go to, I think, French Polynesia right now on a cruise. So he said he couldn't be here and he didn't want us to change the day, but nonetheless, here's the statement. I met Paul 29 years ago. He was one of the first to greet me at Farrell Hall at Michigan State. Learning I was a ham operator, he asked, could I help him learn CW better so he could upgrade? And that was one thing Paul and I were talking to. I wanted to get CW and learn that. But anyway, Morse code, the dit and the da. So this is from Steve. I did what I could, and he was finally ready to take the general exam, but shortly after they canceled the obligation hit CW, and it was dropped as a requirement. But Paul and I had become lasting friends.
He was always there. Once, when I was in the hospital, he visited every day. Upon my release at home, Paul appeared with a small radio and proceeded to route my antenna into the spare bedroom so I had something to do while I recuperated. He was always there. As a friend, travel companion, or just someone to have lunch with. Even today I catch myself, I'm just about to give him a phone call, get some insight, or work on some project, or apply to find out that he's not there. That was our friend Paul. And again, my closing statement, everybody I think is saying the same thing. He was always there for everybody. So I'll miss him.
It's a twofer.
Hi there, I'm Bill Humphrey. As you might guess, I was with the rodeo club. So I met Paul in '86 when he was saving our backsides from the fire marshal at the old pavilion on campus and stuff. And the one thing that that I remember about our first meeting is I was working a stripping shoot, if anybody, so like when the bulls and the horses all come out like with their saddles or flank straps and things like that, they go into a special little shoot, and I was pulling all that rigging off and stuff like that. Well, Paul just jumped right in there. Didn't know the first thing about it, but got some leather gloves and he just jumped right in there and stuff. And I see we have some former rodeo clubs members on there. I see Ann Donahue is logged in. It's now Dr. Donahue, DVM, I believe. And anywho, Paul was just that. You'll see a picture there at the front there under his locked arms picture, and that's him being our best man. And it's my understanding he was probably best man at a number of weddings and stuff, and that's just the way Paul was. Paul traveled with us to rodeos, oh golly, 10 years? And so we have lots of rodeo stories and stuff like that, and Paul obviously was very handy. You know, we had a radiator hose let go, and he had some special tools and knives, and we stopped for about 15 minutes. We were back on the road to Arkansas. The other thing, when we would go to rodeos, there were a lot of us coaches that we all met up at whatever. You know, we went to rodeos in Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Oklahoma, and stuff. And so we would generally we'd pick somebody's room and we'd read from the good book of Daniel, as in Jack Daniels. And Paul brought his Chevys. He always had his Chevys and stuff, and we traveled quite a bit. And then we come to find out one of the rodeo coach from it was Missouri, Southwest Missouri State back then. Now it's Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri. He and his wife were splitting the blanket. They were getting a divorce. Paul and I got named in the divorce because we were all gay going to these rodeo. Oh, okay. So, yeah, so we were almost subpoenaed to go to Springfield, Missouri to testify and stuff about, well, you know, whatever that was. But Paul was also, we would have a pig roast every year, and Paul was there every year with a couple bags of burlap bags of sweet corn, and he was a designated sweet corn. He had made a just thing that was just big giant pot and stuff, and that would run off, you know, great big, I don't know, what is it, like a 20 pound, 20 gallon, whatever, big old propane thing. And he would just stand there the whole afternoon cooking and serving sweet corn and stuff. And, you know, he's one of these guys that, you know, you name it, he's there, anything like that. And, you know, this could go for on, and I'll just quit and give it to my wife.
So I'm Julie Dodds. I'm the other half of this, and if you look close at that picture out there, it is Bill and Paul, unbeknownst to me, right after the wedding, pulled their jackets apart, and they've got red suspenders under their tuxes. So I had to put up with these type of things. The one thing, I had only been here for a little while, and I think we were engaged, and kind of was getting to know Paul, and Paul broke his toe. And as many of you may know, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. So Paul got to tell, and Paul came to me so I could fix his toe. And so Paul told everybody that I screwed his toe. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, just a great guy and important person in our lives, and we will miss him. And yeah, it was sad to watch him go, but the way he went, he was ready to go. So very sad, but good for Paul. So, and I'm number 12 because we had the Humphrey family as a group. So any 13s can come up now.
Yeah, hey, Roger. I'm here. Can you hear me? Great. Hi, I'm Ann Donahue, and I met Paul about the same time that Roger did, because, of course, I met him through Roger. And as I'm listening to all these stories and thinking about all the past times, I had almost forgotten how much time I'd spent with Paul, especially when I was still living in Michigan. I'm now in Fort Collins, Colorado. So there was the rodeo club. There was Roger's cottage. We spent many weekends at Roger's cottage being forced into forced labor to help build his retaining wall that kept the cottage from falling into the lake, and in the meantime cooking a lot of good breakfasts and drinking a lot of kegs of beer. And then I had almost forgotten that Paul and I used to swim together early in the morning, before classes, before work, at the Women's IM on campus. And most of the time I would follow Paul because he was faster than I was. But every now and then he'd get a bug up his butt. He's like, I'm following you and I'm chasing those toes. And you can just imagine, right? So if you're going to swim fast. And then I moved to Fort Collins, and I didn't see Paul very often, but every now and then we'd have a chat, or I'd hear news about him from Roger. And then I think it was a summer, in the mid-90s, he came out to CSU to spend a couple weeks at a course that they were having at CSU that he was taking. I don't even remember what the course was. And that's when we started talking about ham radio. And I had no idea he was a ham radio operator before that. And by the time he left, he'd gone out and purchased the Technician No Code Plus study book and handed it off and said, here, you need to do this. And sadly, it took about 20 years for me to finally do it, but I am now a general class ham radio operator as well, and it's all Paul's fault. And those of you in the room understand what that means, because there's always more gear to buy. And when he sent me a picture of his shack, I kept thinking, wow, I think I need to get Paul to come to my house and help me set up mine. But yeah, I have a lot of really wonderful memories of good time spent with Paul and great conversations. He could talk about just about anything, right? He was a very, very well experienced guy and knew a lot about the world. And I really appreciated him being my friend, and I miss him. That's all I've got.
Forced labor. Is that what you call it, Ann?
Forced labor, yes.
I would agree. I would agree. I hired for beer and food 22 of my best buddies from college to put in 500 railroad ties. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who follows that? It was your own fault. You should have said no.
I couldn't help myself. It was too much fun.
You want it on or off?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicholas Richardson. I'm here with my sister Deborah, son of Tony Richardson from St. Martin. So I know you guys know St. Martin from Paul, definitely. I've known Paul my entire life, from baby, and I've always known Paul to be there for everyone and for everything. When my dad was building the house back in '05, we were about to pour the roof on the second floor, and this was the last and most trickiest part of building the house. And so my dad told Paul the night before, hey, we're going to be pouring the roof, so if you want to come over at the end of the day, just come over and we're going to have some beers and stuff and, come take a look at the work that's done. Paul came the morning, so my dad was like, what are you doing here already? He's like, you got boots? And my dad was like, no, the younger guys are going to go up on top of the roof and stuff. You don't need to go up there, leave it for the other guys. And before you knew it, Paul was up on the roof in his boots and shoveling concrete and pouring the guy with the roof. Another story I have, I was building a cardboard for a boat race. So I was about 13 or 14 years old. I'm very passionate about everything that concerns the ocean and aviation. And Paul always had all these stories about building and codes and all that stuff. And one day we had this project and we had to build a boat from cardboard and it had to float. I did not know how to go about it, and I was talking to my dad. I was like, how can we get this done? Like, how can I do it? He was like, did you call Paul? So we go on and I reach out to Paul and I'm like, yeah, I got to build this cardboard boat and I have to be inside of it for the race. I'm like, I don't know how to do it. He's like, Nicholas, come on, come over. So I head down there the afternoon at the apartment and we start working out, start drawing out and everything, and Paul is like, we're gonna get it done. So I'm like, Paul, are you sure it's not gonna work? He's like, trust me, we're gonna get it done. Before you know it, we got the boat ready. I had the prettiest boat of the entire race, and I ended up winning the race, and I was like, thank you, Paul. So Paul, you're definitely gonna be missed, and thank you all for meeting you guys as well.
I'm Tim Rozowski, and I work with Paul at MSU in our construction management program. So we hired him in 1984, and we were building construction at that time, and then we became building construction management and then construction management. And I think Paul retired in I think 2014 or so. So we have a couple of faculty members here from our program. And we haven't really heard about his impact on students, but he had a tremendous impact on students. And I first met Paul when he came into our program, or our department. We were in Farrell Hall, agricultural engineering, and I think his role was expediter or something like this. But I had attended the National Fire Academy, and we didn't have a fire course, and I got to meet Paul, and he talked about fire, and so he started our fire course, and then that became our codes course. So he's had a tremendous impact on many, many students. So he would have had every one of our students from 1984 through 2014, or did he retire in 14? Yeah, 14, right. And I know the students loved him. He had such practical information. I wanted to come, and I really liked hearing all of these stories because you see him like in a work environment and you understand certain things. I particularly like the story. Actually, I never met Bill, but Julie was my orthopedic surgeon, and just kind of an example of what kind of an expediter. So I had some knee. I think I was playing adult soccer, co-ed soccer, and the women played too rough, and one blew out my knee. So anyway, so you did, Julie, you did 2 of my surgeries, but upon the recommendation of Paul. And but it was interesting because I think it would be in the 90s. Well, first of all, I really like Julie because she allowed me to be awake during my knee surgery, which was really pretty unusual. But at one time, we had 4 of our departments. So Paul, I think, had a shoulder. I had a knee. Kathy Morrison had I think, carpal tunnel or wrist or something, and Bob Varmanuth, I think, had a shoulder. So she was like our department surgeon. You also, Dennis? What's that? 2? Yeah. So anyway, I really liked hearing their stories. But my story, obviously you work with somebody for so many years, you have lots of stories, but I have a unique one that none of you have, and that is that I have been to Roman jail, Roman court, and Roman hospital with Paul. Nothing we did, by the way, but we ran a study abroad program. We had about 20 students, interior design students and construction management students, and so he was a great partner. We did this for not quite 10 years, but he had a favorite winery, the Mezza Corona winery, but he had a favorite wine. I don't know if he ever bought you a bottle of Mazzamino. Okay, he brought you jewelry, right? So we had the favorite wineries, but we did have, so he was a great partner when we had to pick up a student at Roman jail or Roman court or Roman hospital. Anyway, so we're going to miss Paul a lot, and I just wanted to let you know how much impact he had on really, literally thousands of students that came through us, through our program at that time.
I can tell you, reaching out, using his contact list, there was first names only, by the way. His contact list kind of looked like the barn. There were so many students on that he was keeping in touch with. There were so many kids that, commented on what kind of change he made for them. So I just want to throw that out there. There you are, sir.
My name is John Thiel. I'm a retired orthopedic surgeon. And I met Paul in 6th grade. And he was such an electronic wizard. My father was the first radio announcer at WHMI in 57. And in 65, we were juniors in high school. We had a tower would go out of Mason Road periodically. My father didn't call the people at the radio station. He called Paul. Paul would go out and get the radio station back on. He'd put him on the air. Thank Paul Streng for getting out there. So in 1967, January 8th, Paul's 18th birthday, we doubled, went to a Red Wing hockey game. We parked right across the stadium in Olympia. I have a Mother 65 Corvair. The Red Wings won. We came out, the car was gone. I went to a phone booth. I called my dad. He said, "You and Paul better find that damn car and get home." It was a school night. It was parked in a lot. It was $20, and Paul and I fortunately had $21 between us to pay the fine. We got back, and it took 5 minutes at Howell High School the next day. Everybody knew that Paul had stolen my car. My father passed away and was buried the day of our graduating from high school in 67. Paul was a pallbearer at that funeral. He was so close to our family. He was my roommate senior at Michigan State at Cedar Village. We had the best phone and the best stereo in the entire complex. Beautiful. We were in each other's weddings. June 1971, we got married at the Methodist Church. It was 95 degrees, humid, wearing tuxedos. We got in the church, not air conditioned, and Paul had a flask of Southern Comfort for me in the minister's office. I don't even think I remember Barb coming down the aisle. It was like, and it wasn't Chevys, it was Southern Comfort. We're in each other's weddings. My Barbie calls it Pollywog. He's just such a wonderful friend of mine forever. Barb and I are doing a scholarship in Paul's memory at Hall High School, and it'll be lasting for 10 years in his name. And it will go for the person best in the building trades, and the foundation will do it. One last thing. Started orthopedic practice in 99 in Charlotte, moved from Gaylord, and a man comes in and says, "Where'd you grow up, Johnny?" "Howell." "Oh, God, my best friend's from Howell. You wouldn't know him." I said, "Who is it?" "Paul Streng." I said, "I've only known him since I was 6th grade. We're each other's weddings, but so we went to lunch a couple times at the University Club. We will miss him terribly. We love him. Thank you."
I'm Barry Dorn. I shared an apartment with
John and Paul and another friend of ours, Ray, who is down in Florida enjoying the warm weather, couldn't make it today. I go back with John also to, I think it was 1961, we figured that we met Paul, 7th grade, 6th grade, whatever it was, a long time ago. Anyways, we have too many stories of adolescence and days at Cedar Village that we could go over and over that we will probably pass on. But John alluded to the fact that we had probably a 1980s sound system in our 1970 apartment in Cedar Village, all thanks to Paul. And everything was tapped into our rotary desktop phone. We powered 4 big speakers, telephones with 5 lines, and a hold button, which was really cool in 1970. And when the bill came, there was never any extra, but Michigan Bell didn't know what the heck was running off their system. We had a rack. It was actually, John and Paul had one bedroom, Ray and I had the other, and he had one of those racks that he got out of the WHMI studio, you know, with the reel-to-reel tape, and we had an 8-track, and we had a turntable with the diamond tip needle. It was so fabulous, and I mean, he just brought all this stuff like it was nothing, put it together, and we won't go into some of the stories. Obviously, everybody alludes to those things. He was also in my wedding. There was a girl in the wedding that they got, and Paul and she hit it off real well, and her name was Cindy Grimes, and that's sort of how they met in a way, at least the first time. Yeah. Yeah. Till the wedding, and I think it was about 6 months later you guys got married, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. We won't say what the rumors were, but anyway. So, anyways, time went on, and so we can probably say that from the seeds of the Howell public system and Cedar Village, you guys all followed in our footsteps. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Richard Barker. I'm one of the ham radio community guys, and I've not known Paul as long as most of the people here, probably maybe going back 12, 15 years. But I have started a thing called Ham Camp, and Paul was a regular at Ham Camp a couple times a year. And over that time, I think Paul came out with 4 different campers. The first one he had was a little Airstream, and then a little while later he came out with a 3-axle Airstream. It was a big one. Then he came out with a pickup truck camper. Then the last one he came out with was a toy hauler 5th wheel. Nice, big, great, big, beautiful thing. And one of the things we were going to do with that is make a trip up to Whitefish Point, which Mark had mentioned a few minutes ago. And we had a meeting, it was on October 19th, I think. That was the last time that most of us had met Paul face to face down at the Fusion Buffet just down the road here. And Paul was there. He was not really feeling too good. He stood up a lot of the time after dinner. But after that, he made a trip to the hospital, and we kind of know what happened after that. But I've got a number of texts that I was kind of keeping in touch with Paul, and just sorry it turned out the way it did. But we shared a lot, especially at Ham Camp. And it seemed like he was always there. If somebody, I forgot my towel. Here, I got one in the camper. I left my pillow home once. I think I got an extra one in the camper. He seemed to have everything that we needed. And he helped flip some pancakes at our pancake breakfast. And going back a little bit about the St. Martin thing. A number of us on a CRS group called Can't Remember Stuff. We got to talk with Paul on the radio when he was in St. Martin. And I think there was 8 or 10 of us locally that on the 40-meter amateur band, Paul had a nice vertical antenna there. We talked to Paul. And one of the experiences, I've got a video here, I'd like to play it in a minute. There's a fellow by the name of Bud Drummond. He's the an inventor of the buddy pole antenna, and the buddy pole antenna company. His son now runs the company. I spoke with him a while back, and I told him what happened, and I said, could you get us a little video? So I hope it's nice enough you can hear it and see it, so let's give it a try here. Maybe we'll go find it. It's there somewhere. What? What does hand camp mean? Some of the people might not know. Well, I had the video there a minute ago. But our ham camp is something, and I started a few years ago, and we have up to 20 people that have RVs, and we just go out for 2 or 3 days up to Bishop Lake most of the time. We've been out to Bruin Lake, and this spring we're going to be over at the Waterloo Recreation Area because they're doing all the updating in the campgrounds. I think you got it? Just fire it off when you're ready.
Hi, this is Bud, W3FF, and I'm a ham radio operator here in Redding, California. In 2007 to 2016, my son, who owns the Buddy Pole Company, my son and I took a bunch of guys and went down, all as volunteer Buddy Pole users, down to the Caribbean. We call ourselves Buddies in the Caribbean, and we rented first-class villas. We split the expenses, all of us split the expenses, and it was a hoot. And one of the guys we met down there on St. Martin was Paul, W8 Papa Sugar. Rich, of course, kept in touch with me over the years and told me that Paul had passed away, and we felt very sad about that. But I remember one of the Super Bowls we're in down there, this guy shows up at our door, rings the bell, comes in through the gates, and here he is, and he's got a case of really high-quality booze. Beers from all over the Caribbean and the world. And I thought, hey, I'm going to like this guy. Man, I really did, I have to say. W8PS, I had no idea of his background, who he was. All I knew was he had a magical smile. He was so friendly. He also owned a place down there in St. Martin, so he had a villa not too far from where we stayed. But anyway, that Super Bowl was a great memory, or is a great memory for us right now. We appreciate him. I had no idea how popular he was in his hometown up there. But Paul always thought ahead on all of these occasions. And we're just happy we met him, and we're sorry he passed away.
Okay. Oh, that was Bud, W3FF from Redding, California. So, anyway, I guess that's about all I got here. I'll move it on to the next person, and thank you, Roger, for putting this together.
Dennis. Who's next after Dennis?
Hi, my name is Dennis Welch. I ran into Paul in ag engineering. I taught there and ran a research lab in that facilities. Teaching hydraulics class, that's where I ran into Roger in the class. They're having problems with the fire marshal at the rodeo. After class, I got him lined up with Paul. Paul's part mafia. He knows everybody. He has connections in all angles, okay? He's got a good heart, but damn, he has a way of getting things done. So from that part, line those two up, from that combination then, that's where I ran into Bill.
Bill through that situation. So time's passed on. I had a daughter who was playing soccer and messed up her knee. I was trying to get into Julie Dodd's office with my daughter. It was like a 4-week waiting list to get in. Paul's office was next to mine. Got chatting. He says, I know how we can get this done. I didn't want to get involved with this, okay? He gets a hold of Bill, calls Bill, tells him the situation. Bill calls Julie, which I thought that would split something up here somehow down the road, but I guess it stayed together. So he gets Bill to call Julie. Julie's office calls back and got my daughter in the next day. Moved me up 4 weeks on the deal. So that's how I ran into Julie then from my daughter. Then she took care of both my shoulders and rotator cuff, 2 rotator cuffs and a shredded bicep. So Paul has connections. He's got something going on probably right now. So he's been good. He's helped a lot of students over the years. Everybody knew him. And I've never heard anything negative about the guy. He's always been there to help. And I think you heard that enough in here today. Thank you, Roger.
There's a lot more of you that haven't told the story, and you promised me. What number? We're on 18 or 19, I think. 18? You got 19? Good enough.
Squeeze me in?
Absolutely. Who's after him?
Unaccustomed as I am to public speaking is something you'll never hear a ham radio operator say, ever. We're just used to public speaking. But I had never really met Paul, except for just a couple of years back, really. I'd seen him at various ham radio events and conventions and stuff. And, you know, just, hi, how you doing? And then one night down at Ham Camp, which Rich has already talked about, we're sitting around the evening bonfire. You got to understand, this thing reached about 20 foot in the air. You know, there's more wood, more wood. And we're sitting around talking, having our favorite beverages. And people were talking about Paul. And just, you know, pilot, mayor, fire chief, all of this going on. And I'm looking at him. And I'm looking at him. He looked over at me. He says, "What?" I said, "You don't look that impressive." He said, "I'm not." And that's kind of the way he was, very understated. You know, he didn't brag about himself at all. And I immediately liked him. He was one of these guys that you could talk to in a couple of minutes and get to enjoy. And I think the reason because of that was because he took on every job, every project, as it was the most enjoyable, important thing he was going to do in his entire life. He just poured himself right into it. There was just no holding back. And heck of a guy.
Great story. I got one more? All right, let me throw one in here. So you want to talk about somebody that was, when I met him, I called him the man with the largest Rolodex. Most people don't even, if you said that to this younger generation, they wouldn't even know what a Rolodex is. But he had 4 of them on his desk. I taped a yardstick to the side of his desk and put OSHA regulations on it because it was about to collapse. His desk was so piled high with stuff. But how many people here went to his retirement? So be patient because you're going to hear the same story.
Me, I went.
So if you want to hear about the effect and the ability of Paul Streng, I was in the rodeo. We stored 12 calves in Hazlet, Michigan, and every Thursday night after probably more than just one night a week, but Thursday night club meeting, we roped calves for until 1 or 2 in the morning. But we had a barn in Hazlet, but we couldn't back the trailer up to it, so we had to walk each calf out of the trailer and into the barn. We got 11 in. The 12th one kicked our butt. All I remember is Charlie Griffin on the end of its tail as that thing headed out into the darkness. We hunted for 3 or 4 hours in cowboy boots and 2 feet of snow trying to find that calf and couldn't find it. So I had to call back to our advisors and say, we screwed up. If somebody hits that calf, you need to know about it. I didn't hear anything. Back then, there was no cell phones, right? So I get done with class. It's amazing I actually went. Went into the club room, and there's written in his immaculate handwriting on our whiteboard, get out to Hazlitt right now. Fly out to Hazlitt, and I knew for Paul he was going to have a 2-way radio underneath the seat of his car if I could find it. So I'm searching, find his car, reach on the seat. There's sure enough 2-way radio. Just at that time, I see this huge plume of snow come up above the trees, and I'm going, what is that? And I'm not exaggerating. The man was standing on the landing gear of a helicopter that happened to have Michigan State Police written across it. As a young kid, I was like, this tops it all. And the chief of Michigan State Police was calling the pilot, going, where are you? And so he had to dump Paul off. And we went and roped the calf, threw it in my blazer, and put it back to where it belonged. But that tells you, the man with the biggest Rolodex he could call in, he could call in anything. At his retirement, I had Richie, the police fire chief, or state police captain, I had him write an invoice for the use of the helicopter, for those of you who weren't there. This man was impactful. With that said, and anybody else want to top my story? No? With that said, I can't thank you enough for coming. I don't know how many times we heard the word rescue. Help came right away. That was Paul. So thank you. Appreciate your time coming, and I appreciate you honoring Paul.
Well, take her to the grocery store. She got what good are you, Joe?
You laughed at that. Too excited. So, you laughed at that Papa Sugar thing that I said.
Still planning on 2 cans. And then he got a higher class. Yeah. And then let you get the class and just 2 letters in the second part. So he dropped the bead and gave him the ES. Paul's right. And the when he's talking about the standard phonetics of E or F, having a hard time understanding somebody who's starting to say phonetics, like alpha, bravo, delta, etc.
My father was K8SSC.
Oh, there you go. So you already know that. When you saw Papa Sugar, he laughed.
Yep. Papa's good.
And they make you learn all that stuff.
Well, you gotta. You can't get your license.
I just go into it periodically over the phone when somebody's having trouble with understanding B and P and C and D, and they go, "Were you in the military?" I said, "No, worse, hammer you."
Well, that's something really good about that, really. Still like what I do. Are ya? Yeah, but you know so much about it, you almost make it weird. I've only been gone.
90 days
Well, when I first started, I worked at a dry cleaner. Then I got married and got then I went back to school. I didn't want to work. So all I knew for a long time I don't miss the work.
I made a ring go right through this bag. Yeah, I think it's so strong. I think they got beyond 5G in there. It's like you just got waves so long. I've heard guys that said some of the 5G is they got so much juice going to those 5G tempers. Just making sure
I gotta go. I talk to my everything right now. Everybody knows that.
Interesting. Right through. Sorry.
No, you're not fine.
It only happens in scientific. I think it's because I've been setting up automated machines. Great. Yeah, I know. I thought I'd say racing. I was texting her when she was talking. Yes, WWE. He started in Florida. Okay, you're all set.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not joking. Well, the real question is, I want to know who made up the whole march. That is a real
Expressway, go down there.
I've been in there once or twice. I wasn't alone. I drove in
Everyone's got one. What's the big deal? Oh, it's home, you know? See you. They're asking him if he remembered the Scotch story. We didn't know. He's like, I did. You ever been to hospital?
I remember that. Paul was so fucking
You know what I wanted to do There wasn't a drop left. Yeah, we were just being hospitable. You know, we didn't want to hand out Thursday. I mean, this is a lot of fun at, did we go to Hickory right after? You were alive. I mean, I think my dad's like, don't worry, he's early.
I never turned his head when I was like, he's like, just wait till you take Helen. And I never took it. So I had to take
You want to say hi to
Where were you? It hasn't got any better. I know he can't. Oh yeah. Now he's got two rays. He reached out to me about expert. I said expert. Give it to his place too. He did my mower. Got a letter. I stayed with you. Well, it's funny when Roger texts me, he's like, yeah, you know, we just have a name and his contact. I'll be there. Don't worry about it. Yeah. I've got a name right here. I'm glad you still have a diving stick. Where the hell you got your track?
But it'll go longer than you need to shoot just watch your it's not trying to be feeling okay. I'm gonna get some
You want to put one in for every person like a date. It only costs you $25 because it gives you the database.
Those are some parties.
So you allows me to keep my whole phone number in Colorado. I'm I don't know if my name is a man. So you'll see it as you see. Then you can write it
That's all something. No, that's how it should. Yeah, those fluffy rooms. Maybe take one of those. Yeah, I'm also using that's all subdivisions back there. Yeah, that's all houses back there, but it never.
What you can do is write it down and remember.
Still ready for us to be set up? Yeah, we were park up on the hill.
Dad, you gotta try to show this stuff here.
Right, yeah, like map it out for us. I will. Really trying to say I'm ready. So I have to get this clean out those 3 acres. But I can imagine if your gardens like your garden. I saw her talking. I don't know what you did. He's like, you tell me. Take care of it. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I can put us in.
I didn't know he had gotten here. Because I haven't been over to the barn in years. Well, I did tell her I said, talk about how he had taken 4 boxes of stuff out. And he said, the rest of the stuff.
But I haven't talked to him.
I said, well, that's not your fault. So were you Howell? What the trailers that we always have? So my sister ran.
Oh, wait, let me put my cross sign.
Yeah, and we probably
Well, now it looks like it's going through. Yes. One of the Hebrew guys was this driving along the he said, I recognize her.
Yeah, there you go.
But he's handling all of
Oh, okay. Yeah, we were originally keeping to go to the US. Now we dropped the B, so we're just going to Xenia.
Where is it? Just wait till you take that. I was like, okay, and then I forgot to turn it because I'm sorry.
I need to get my extra. I'm trying to take it up. Yeah, it's all this I don't, and then the next test,
print that out. Go to the library, print it out again. Take that test. You can also have a reading. You guys are people like memorize, like the robot. Memorization is something hard.
Yeah, that's how I am.
Directions, right? Others people learn the basics, then you end up with mental death. So it's like you don't want to learn the basics. Nothing wrong with a little bit of memorization.
Yeah, no.
I remember his mom and his dad.
Yeah, and that's what's going to help you. That's sometimes those people beyond what I can do. But I'm like, I can learn the answers, but just memorize.
Never let anybody memorize.
Yeah,
that way you
yeah.
just go and take mom and mom.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, yeah, feel free to text me and send me your info and I'll it's over there at the table. Okay, all right.
Oh, yes.
Our vision every year.
And it was, and I went, Dave and I went to, in his honor, spent 4 days there.
Yeah, it is. It'll say Miss Fall.
Held up because I was coming back. So kept trying to get
Yeah, right
Right about that time, what a way to wake up in the morning.
There's nothing to see here.
And right now, they're pulling all these controls and sitting next to nobody. I got the long hair when I said I was
It's been a while. It's been a while for everyone. It really has. I think since, they moved everything from gathering, just gathering. Senior. It's a fairgrounds. It's a popular one. I better leave then.
So what's happening?
The little assistants. The little assistants, that's all. Need a little, that gopher,
All right, that's it. Everybody, here we are. Pour out. All right.
We went down to yeah, you get back out of it. So Pam and I went ahead and did it. Really read him right down in his honor.
So good to see you. Every year in January,
Hi, this is Bud, W3FF, and I'm a ham radio operator here in Redding, California.
Yeah, I know. Last time he saw me, I just... Well, when we had those elections back in '16, I decided I was going to do this, just make myself look scarier. When you're a precinct chairperson, you got to keep command of the precinct. Did you ever get all your brother's stuff on?
I got one right now.
Well, that's a plus.
She's about 6
Unlike Paul, you got a lot of stuff.
5 years worth of those. Every year I but she's the sweetest dog. Oh, yeah. I go there and load that baby up.
See, we're not retired yet. Close. But getting to the hands hard.
He would show up and date Paul in the parking lot because he always gets sight right next to Paul.
Because I get the emails like every day.
That your call would be like, look like low profile tires.
I guess they gave up on you. So you didn't start painting hers on.
All this 1960s equipment that is all metal faces and real transformers and heavy iron.
Yeah, you just kind of, exactly.
I'm sorry?
I didn't even see you.
You got up, I told my wife, there's my webcam right there. I said, there's Steve right there. He's the guy I've been seeing at the hangar.
Anyway, you guys still in Howell?
Talking about back too when we used to go Hollywood, remember? And
I got 2 brand new hips now.
Yeah, I got a new art.
Okay.
Except for just in a couple of bypass.
Yeah.
So I'm good to go.
So we get inside before you look at this.
Yeah, I know. Lemon juice. Take lemon juice. It's diluted with water. It's not pure lemon juice.
And I have
You spray it on yourself. Actually, you don't have to use all now. I use this. I'm still going. Doing cardiac. I just don't. The chemical off stuff makes me kind of sick. Nobody wants to be a home chef.
Yeah, and you know, no one wants to be around me anyway, so shower, you do exactly.
Tell people for the last 6 months of last year, I couldn't hardly walk.
Well, the lemon juice is just a lot safer too. Like if you have a dog, it's really hurt from working out or something. It's just they haven't been used in 20 years.
I almost cried.
The lemon juice works
They
really
fixed this
well.
one first because it hurt first. And I got up to get
And
you right up
obviously,
right
if
away.
you're in a heavier, like really dense mosquito area, just use a pure lemon juice. They'll definitely stay away. They can't stand the smell. It plugs up their little proboscis thing. You know, their little smell.
Good, we need lots of it.
Yeah. So nobody else.
You drink her.
I didn't bring my
Someone have like lemonade?
No, he wouldn't take me to date. I wanted to go with my sister, but he wouldn't take me.
See, Pam was always there, you had.
I gotta use
that's true.
Good to see you.
Girl stuff, leave them to it.
Nice to see you.
He wanted to buy some old radios.
Safe travels going home.
I still got a few of those laying around. You want to drink?
Stay out of trouble.
We still had that. I
Oh,
worked with
God.
Paul on that. he got the garage cleaned up. It took 3 dumps. And when Marcia pulled the car in the garage, she started crying. How long has it been?
Jack's son.
I don't know, at least 20 years. But we started organizing the vacuum trucks downstairs. Paul was going to had a person that broker that buys all these old vacuum tubes, and he was going to come in and just clean everything up. And never got to it. Finished that.
That's what we had with my brother. Finally, because he had a ton of it.
It's better than your
And everybody hand him off vacuum tubes.
I estimated that he's got at least 15,000.
Oh. Some brokers really have. Remember the You better have bigger than 12-inch tire on it. Yeah, well, Paul did a lot of stuff too. You guys cleaning him out? Yeah, and it's stunk.
Roger I spent Thursday with Roger and Steve was sitting here, and we hauled the camper, car, and the tow dolly over to Sheridan's auction area. And the big Airstream is already there, the Massey's over there, and there's some other stuff over there. But yeah, Steve's got a lot of to do.
I still got a few old things that I was thinking about.
We're going to put up a few pictures of Paul now that were submitted.
Send them down to that. What's that auction house in Missouri? There's a famous auction house that does all that. He'll auction it off. Whole set of morals. Those are yours, but you probably can sell them.
In the basement, there was this one little path that sneaked to the washer and dryer. And of course, Marcia had gotten to the point where she was having problems. I do my daughter. The laundry down. You know, she says, I haven't even actually been down there in like 3 years. And I said, don't do it now.
Oh, yeah. She had a horse that lived 32 years. Yeah, I was the same thing with my brother. So I just a couple little cabs. That was about it. 32 years. Like, that horse. A lot of stuff. My one daughter said,
Wait, dude, horse had a lot of junk. A lot of it went, like I said, put into the dumpster.
About a week later, Jack probably has a lot of stuff. Then my second one.
At least the last 10 years.
And she had meat for a day after. She had to leave early. We got to throw the hay out there for the horse. I'm like, what's that, my horse?
Apparently years ago, so Monday at 10 o'clock is when I got to see it. Yeah, I've got a lunch I got to get to and I'll spend an hour there. And it probably won't take us, the 3 of us, we should be able to get it. Well, I'll bring my little sprint stuff, that'll light that sucker right off. I'll bring my charger too, just in case.
Sounds good. Whatever you do.
You know, get a little ether into those dudes, they take right off. Get a little ether into those dudes, and they take right off.
But it was a good fire holder and the
The only thing we'll have to make sure is that Paul, first year, is fairly fastidious about that. He probably